Merlin Car Auctions.
Sold.
Visit merlin.ie now.
Across Ireland. This is the IMRO Radio Awards National Station of the Year. This is News Talk.
It's 2 o'clock. Good afternoon. I'm Adrian Harman. The Health Minister says he has full confidence in Micheál Martin as party leader and believes internal bickering is bad for Fianna Fáil. Stephen Donnelly's comments follow calls from Barry Cowan for a special meeting to analyse the party's poor performance in the Dublin Bay South by-election. Sligo Leitrim TD Mark McSharry has also called on Micheál Martin to resign as party leader. However, Minister Donnelly doesn't agree that he should step down.
I have full confidence in Micheál Martin. I think he's doing a really good job in what is an incredibly difficult period for the country.
Allowing unvaccinated under 18s access indoor dining could lead to a rise in COVID cases in younger people, according to an immunology expert. Cabinet will meet tomorrow to sign off on plans to reopen indoor dining later this month, likely to be July 26th. Proposals include restricting those who are over 18 from accessing venues if they aren't vaccinated or recently recovered from the virus. Kingston Mills, Professor of Immunology at Trinity College Dublin, says the rule runs the risk of it spreading between children and unvaccinated staff.
That's the big sort of elephant in the room in all of this, is that you're thinking all the time about the people who are going to the pubs and restaurants, but not about the staff, and very often the staff are young, and many of them won't have been vaccinated. So that's the risk for them, and they have to serve these people, and they're getting, close enough to them.
Gardaí and Donegal are appealing for information on a white van after a 34-year-old woman died in a hit and run overnight. Emergency services were called to the scene on the N15 at Town Parks in Lifford in the early hours of this morning. The van and its driver are yet to be found, and officers are appealing for them to come forward. Anyone with information is asked to contact Letterkenny Garda Station. And finally, a ceremony to mark the National Day of Commemoration took place in Collins Barracks in Dublin today. The event was held in honour of the Irish servicemen and women who died at war or serving for the UN. The President Michael D. Higgins laid a wreath in memory of those who died, after which a minute's silence was observed. It's coming up to 2 minutes past 2.
News Talk weather.
Thanks to Ryanair. School's out. Time for a family holiday in Spain, Italy, Portugal and Greece.
Rather wet with outbreaks of rain, drier though over Ulster. There'll be some bright spells also, mainly in the south and west, with highest temperatures of 16 to 20 degrees. And now you're up to date on News Talk.
The Sunday Papers on Off the Ball.
Now, you're very welcome back. So we're chatting through the Sunday papers. Very happy to say we have Vincent Hogan with us, Chief Sportswriter with the Irish Independent. Hi, Vincent.
Hi, Joe.
And Johnny Ward with us as well, racing journalist, often here talking football on Saturdays as well. Johnny, great to have you with us.
How are you getting on, Joe?
Great. So the front pages, oh my God, England, Italy, Central. So I'm conscious a lot of people will podcast this as well on a Monday. We'll try and keep this as date free as possible, but so front page, we'll start with the Observer, and it's just a big old red and white cover there. England expects is the very short headline. Euro 2020 final, pages 2 through to 19 in the Observer, and that is a lot of words, so that sets the tone. I think the Sunday People, this is their front page. I mean, forget about back pages. This is obviously just the biggest story in town over in England. Pride of England, giant line and the various players surrounding the picture there, and then the back page, it's a picture of Gareth Southgate and Tom Cruise as well, as you'll find is across a lot of the back pages. Mission Impossible. It seems that Tom Cruise, who's in London, he was at Wimbledon yesterday, FaceTimed the team to wish them luck, so that's leading the way for a lot of the papers. The back page of the Sun here, it's a picture of Harry Kane on a motorbike and then Tom Cruise inside. Mission Impossible, Kane, we can cruise to victory. Harry Kane talking here about Tom Cruise FaceTiming the team and how that was very nice. Sunday Mirror, again, picture of the team celebrating from the Denmark game on top of Harry Kane. You can fly high, England's Top Guns told to bring it home by movie star Cruise. It's amazing the prominence of the Tom Cruise angle here, but there you go. And then the Sunday World, we have Mancini. Is Italy coming home? Azzurri out to destroy the English dream of Euro glory at Wembley. And they say that Roberto Mancini has declared his side are technically superior to their Wembley rivals. His actual quotes, though, are, England are physically stronger than us all over the park, not just in midfield, but football is played with the ball to feet. So hopefully, so we hope our technique can win out. I wouldn't say he's declared, it's better. He's hoping their technique wins out. But that's Mancini in the back page there. Sunday Independent. So we're away from the English pictures here. It's Kerry on a mission. It's a photo last night of Kerry's win against Tipperary, a throw-in, and then Kane is determined to have final say beneath that again. Harry Kane was obviously speaking to the press yesterday. The Mail on Sunday, picture of Harry Kane, home truths. Are England finally ready to make history against Southgate? And Kane believe they are, but the Italians are equipped to spoil the party. And then beneath that, Scullion misses Tokyo to protect mental health. This is Irish marathon runner Stephen Scullion has revealed he will not compete in the Olympic Games as he wants to prioritise his mental health. He was one of the informed Irish athletes of recent years, writes Shane McGrath, ran a brilliant time of 2 hours, 9 minutes, 49 seconds in the elite-only London Marathon last year to secure his place in Tokyo. However, he said on social media last night, I'll not be going to Tokyo, and until I feel in a better place with mental health, I am taking some time to myself. I apologise to anybody who supported me until now and feels let down. Well, I think we are all in agreement there is zero apology needed there, and I think he should be commended for looking after himself. And then Sunday Times, finally, picture of the Lions, and it's Conor Murray and Tom Curry, it looks like, celebrating last night. They beat the Sharks again, 71 points to 31, smiling, but for how long? Another easy win for Lions, but things go from bad to worse off the pitch. I might start with that front page, by the way, on the Sunday Times, on the Lions front. The news now from the South African camp, not good. 26 positive COVID cases in South African camp. This is Brendan Nell writing here, Vincent. So the South African rugby officials have flown in their chief security officer and chief medical officer to the Springbok camp to ensure that protocols in the biobubble are being followed. It would seem that the South African rugby chief executive, Jurie Roux, also turned up at the hotel and, according to the Sunday Times here, read the riot act to the team this week, warning of the severe financial consequences if the tour is cancelled because of a COVID outbreak. And Roux, that's Jurie Roux, the South African chief executive, has also sent in Rory Stein. So Rory Stein was Nelson Mandela's bodyguard back in the day. So he has been sent in to make sure that protocol are being obeyed. And then one complicating factor with the test on July 24th to come, the first test, players have to undergo a medical before plane test to ensure no lasting damage was done to their heart and lungs by COVID. That process can delay the return by up to 17 days. So things are getting very sketchy here. I don't know the ins and outs of that 17-day process, but it's mentioned here in the Sunday Times, tests on heart and lungs. And like I said, first test scheduled for July 24th. So things are getting very tight now. It's quite interesting, Vincent, to see the South African chief executive reading the riot act, as the Sunday Times puts it, because the Lions have had 2 cases, but in fairness to them and their procedures, those 2 cases have been contained, whereas this seems to be ripping through the South African camp at the moment.
It does, Joe, and it does remind you, you're kind of from this remove, you're still asking yourself, why is this tour going ahead? It doesn't make a hell of a lot of sense from this distance. But of course, one of the reasons it's going ahead is the South African Rugby Union needs the finances from a Lions tour. So I would say the chief executive there, that they're probably living on their nerves here, because this seems to be hanging by a thread. But what I find really interesting about the coverage this morning is the divergence of opinion between those of us who are on this side of the equator and those of us who have actually travelled. And Stephen Jones, writing in the Sunday Times, is very much buying into the siege mentality that I presume Warren Gatland wants his travelling party to, absorb, I suppose, because of the extraordinary conditions. And Stephen's piece is very interesting to me because he starts by writing about the Welsh hooker Ken Owens, and the players are consistently getting these messages: stay in your room. So for Wednesday, Ken Owens basically spent the day in his room playing Candy Crush Saga on his phone. Now, this is so far removed from the traditional idea we have of being a Lions tourist in a country like South Africa, and all of the social aspects of it, and the meeting and greeting local people, going and giving coaching sessions. Here is a player in his room on his phone playing games. But the quotes that stand out for me from Stephen Jones, who is over there, he says, it may be significant that the opinion seems to differ sharply when you draw an equatorial line across the arguments. It may be significant that no one in the Lions party is less than totally dedicated to getting the job done no matter what. And no one in the small group of camp followers in other professions reporting technical, etc., differs. It may be the sharing of similar privations, or it may be that inspiration is something that comes from being up close, but some of us are becoming increasingly inspired by the tenacity and professionalism of these Lions in the face of the enemy, brackets, the virus, not the Springboks. And that's so far from, I'm reading Rory Keane in the Mail, Brendan Fanning in the Sunday Independent, and they're taking what seems to me is a perfectly logical analysis of this, which is it's a misadventure from day one. It shouldn't have gone ahead. But Stephen Jones, who's out there, is buying into the siege mentality.
What's your read on it, Johnny?
Yeah, it's, I suppose, explained there by Vinny that, if the last time I saw Vinny, I think we were at Cheltenham, Vinny, last year working, and if ever there was a situation of being over somewhere where it was completely different to the kind of situation at home, and it was an evolving situation, you were almost in your own bubble at that time, and this seems something similar in that it looks quite preposterous really to me from afar that this is going ahead. Like, you read the juxtaposition of the two headlines in the front of the Sunday Times, which is 26 positive cases and then injury doubt over Russell, which almost seems completely irrelevant, and Brendan Fanning's piece, which I think is laced with kind of, cynicism really. He just talks about the fundamentals of this being about money effectively. Professional sport is all about keeping the show on the road. Dignity is a bonus. He calls it, ridiculous or farce. And he talks about how the Heineken Cup was actually born out of the idea that they needed professional players to be playing more rugby. And it's just astonishing how many cases are. Like, I haven't really been following the lines, to be honest, and I'm less inclined to follow it when I hear every day of, the latest kind of COVID farce. It's bonkers. I mean, I don't know, from people maybe who are into rugby, is the feeling that this just will go ahead at all costs, because it looks a bit scandalous at this stage, really. 26 cases in one camp. I mean, where do we go from here? And COVID has been around a long time at this stage, but sometimes you forget how dangerous this can be. And when you make that point there, Joe, about they're doing the test so that you're not showing any repercussions several days later and so forth. I don't really know how this can go on.
Yeah, it seems like it is going on. The threat of long COVID, I'm sure, is one that's occurred to lots of the players, and that would have a devastating effect on their careers. For one thing, it seems, Vincent, as if this is going ahead, there is an existential threat to the finances of South African rugby. They need this test and the television money and everything that might go with it desperately. There is no room in the calendar for this to happen next year. So you get the impression they have just decided that the option of flying everybody up to the UK is off the table logistically. Flying down to Cape Town might help in the short term, but really this is a wave and it's working its way through the country. So Cape Town will be just as affected very, very soon. You get the impression they're just hanging in there and just hoping that the 3 tests go off without a major hitch. And by a major hitch, I mean either so many cases that one of the games has to be cancelled, or so many cases that the integrity of the game really is always remembered as being somewhat dubious. And they figure, I would think, if we can get out of this with 3 really good test matches, then the slightly ridiculous start of the tour, which is what we're enduring at the moment, will be forgotten. They may well be correct in that assertion if it goes that way, but at the moment, the 26 positive COVID cases in the South African camp, the way the Lions were affected midweek, from this vantage point, the likelihood of those 3 tests going off without a hitch seems near impossible.
Yeah, I mean, I think you said the first test, is it 24th?
Yeah.
It seems an eternity away in these circumstances. And Rory Keane mentions the fact that of 59 million South Africans, I think 3% have been vaccinated at this stage. We've no real clarity either on how many of the South African players or their extended party have been vaccinated. And that's something that Brendan Fanning touches on he writes, it beggars belief that in such a risky adventure, both camps were not out front on the issue of vaccination. Lions managing director Ben Calvley was simply evasive on why the round of double jabs did not cover every man and woman in the travelling party, which is astonishing to me. Listening to him dodge the issue was like hearing a platoon commander as his troops were going over the top, conceding that not everyone had live ammo, as it should be a matter of personal choice.
Yeah.
Like, that sums up the almost comedic nature of this. And I just find it very hard to see in a situation where today we're hearing 26 positives in the Springbok camp, 14 of whom are players. It's very hard to see how we get to July 24 without this disintegrating further. And, an interesting piece by Stuart Barnes in the Sunday Times, he makes what I think is the not unreasonable point that maybe the way they should have gone is just play 3 test matches. If you want to go ahead, play the 3 test matches, but any warm-up matches should have been played on home soil. The idea of having the South Africans come up and play in the UK, I think that was going to be done on the basis that the British government would underwrite it financially, which they clearly were not going to do. But it's just been this kind of situation from the get-go, from a year out almost, where you're saying it's just not sustainable to do this, is it?
I do have some sympathy for them in that this third wave has coincided with the tour, so it's been disastrous timing, really. I agree with Stuart Barnes' point about just play the 3 test matches makes perfect sense. Like, I think it's him in the Sunday Times as well who says that, Warren Gatland effectively knows his team anyway, that these warm-up matches increasingly have become a waste of time. They were useful back in the day when a head coach mightn't be that familiar with all the players, but these days, modern technology being what it is, Warren Gatland knows everything there is to know about these players. So there is no great need for these warm-up matches. Like, to play the Sharks twice, I mean, I can't say we were all chomping at the bit to watch that rematch last night.
No, to be honest, and I think historically, once the Lions arrive in South Africa or Australia or New Zealand, I would always be clued in. I'd be listening and watching, and what time is their warm-up match on against so-and-so, and God, the feeling this week was, who gives a, they're playing the Sharks twice. They hammered them the first time, and then, I see in some of the match coverage that, Tyke Furlong, for example, wasn't particularly good in the game. And you're just thinking from a psychological point of view, how difficult it must be for the players to even get up for these games. The trap of complacency must be huge in these circumstances. And I get the impression that's what happened to them yesterday. Was it 26 all or 28 all at half time?
Yeah.
And then they just wiped the floor with the Sharks in the second half when they're reminded, look, you can't allow this happen. And they go and they get serious about their business. I also kind of feel sorry for Conor Murray, who at the last minute, because of Alan Wynne-Jones' injury, inherited the captaincy. This fantastic privilege and honour of being a Lions captain. And it must be really, really challenging for him to just step into the breach at short notice in the most extraordinary circumstances and try to sustain this attitude of competitiveness and freshness, which, again, I go back to the fact, July 24th, first test, it just seems an eternity away in these circumstances.
Yeah.
I had to laugh as well, Joe. The player ratings or whatever, we'll probably be talking about England's ratings that the Times gives them, but there's Lions player ratings, 104 out of 150 by Stephen Jones. And then they have like kind of a good day, bad day section on the right. And it's called The Lions Who Roared and Those Who Coughed, which I thought was rather unfortunate in the circumstances.
Yeah, well, we'll see what happens. I mean, I'd still look forward to the tests if they can happen and they're not completely undermined by what's going on. But from this vantage point, it just looks like it's in a bad situation. So that's the front page of the Sunday Times. I do want to go to Shane McGrath's piece on what the Irish Olympians are facing into. Vincent, you spotted this piece and it's really interesting. I mean, it doesn't sound like fun. First, we'll go to Andy Moran, though, and just check in at McHale Park. About 20 minutes gone. Andy, Mayo against Leitrim here in this Connacht semi-final. How are we looking?
Yeah, Joe, first quarter here, just over water break, and it's 8 points to Mayo, 2 points to Leitrim. Going as we thought, Mayo too much pace, too much power. Leitrim doing a couple of things really well, but instead of playing the direct ball, which will kind of even out the game for them, they're playing an awful lot of the game in the middle sector, and Mayo, every time they turn them over, it's score after score. And up front for Mayo, it's all about Ryan O'Donoghue, 2 points, 3 assists, Tommy Conroy 3 points, and Matty Rowan 2 points as well. So they're the guys that are really doing the damage here to the Leitrim team.
Very good, thanks to Andy Moran. 20 minutes gone in that game, Mayo in control thus far. So page 64 here, the Mail on Sunday, Vincent Hogan. Danger zone, Ireland's Olympians are flying into a city clouded in risk and uncertainty, and the team's medical experts are gearing up for, quote, unbelievable challenges. The couple of weeks in the build-up to these games for the athletes are laid out here brilliantly by Shane McGrath, and, well, it's no fun, to say the least here.
No, and, it's interesting that you're trying to imagine what this is going to be like over there, Joe, because I always think from an athlete's point of view, going into the athlete's village must be one of the most exciting experiences of all time. I think Billy used to refer to it as Fantasy Island, and you see all of these young, fit, healthy, excited people convening and mixing, and just the social side of it just forever memorable for the rest of your life. And I honestly wonder, for some of the athletes who are going, do they really know what they're facing into? Because it's not going to be anything like a traditional Olympics. I think there's 114 on the Irish team now, maybe one more or two more to fill in, but they know what they're facing now in terms of competition. But the circumstances they're flying into, and finally we have the situation where they're going business class, so there's comfort in travel. But even going business class, they're going to have to wear, or they're being advised to wear, PPE with visors, and they're going to have to wear special masks. So this is for the 12-hour flight or whatever it is going to take them to get to Tokyo, and then they go into a kind of a quarantine for 3 days. And they also, for a lot of individual athletes who are going on their own, they'll have to share a room with probably someone they don't even know. So it just strikes me, ordinarily I'd be going. I've been at the last 6, but I really wasn't comfortable traveling to this one, so I pulled out in early March. And I'm so relieved I'm not going, Joe, because there is no sense of the locals wanting you there. I think after a huge acceleration of the vaccination program, there's now about 16% of the locals have been vaccinated. It's nowhere near what would make them comfortable. But with an Olympics, the IOC holds all the cards. And I get the impression the Japanese government has been forced into a corner that they have to go ahead with this because they will pick up the bill on everything. And we now have a situation where we know it's going to be behind closed doors. The whole experience for these athletes going over there is going to be so different from what historical the athletes experience. So this is why I was really taken with this piece. Shane interviews Dr. Jim O'Donovan, who's the Chief Medical Officer of Official Federation of the Olympic Federation of Ireland, and he also talks to Dr. Kate Kirby, and it just sets out the practicalities of this, and they're practicalities like nothing we've ever known for Olympic athletes in the history of the Games.
No, it's true. It seems Team Ireland will have a vaccination rate of close to 100%. They've to keep a diary of all their symptoms and their general health for the 14 days prior to the flight. The flight, it seems, is the riskiest part of the whole endeavour. They're, as you said, in quasi-quarantine for 3 days afterwards. They'll have tests both sides. It's interesting, the team are flying out in different cohorts. So there'll be, even though there's 114 members, they're going out in 10 different travelling parties, because it seems that in some circumstances the public health situation over in Japan will describe the whole plane as close contact. So they want to obviously avoid a situation whereby there's one positive on a plane with the vast majority of the Irish Olympians, and then carnage would ensue. As you said, business class, PPE. It seems they're all being given FFP2 masks to wear right across the games, which have filtration system in part. So 3 per day have been given to all the athletes, which in fairness seems like a plentiful amount and should help the situation. But full on, and the piece kind of concludes with Shane McGrath saying that the athletes' thoughts will be consumed by the need to do the right thing all the time, be in the right place, do everything absolutely perfectly, and then they'll have to find time to manage the performance of their lives, which, you know, it's almost like an afterthought, the perform well part, if you can just get through all the protocol. As a matter of interest, Vincent, did you decline going on ethical grounds, or was it just more the personal risk, or just that you thought the experience would be a bit miserable?
No, it was personal risk. I have an underlying health condition, Joe, and I would have been advised very strongly by the consultant not to go next door near it. Right. So I made the call quite early, so it wouldn't inconvenience the company too strongly. But the other thing to remember here is as well, you know, a large part of the Olympic experience for the athletes is when their event ends, be it well or badly, they stay in the village and they can soak it up and go into the host city and really be part of it and feel welcome and feel exhilarated by being Olympians. My understanding is that as soon as your event is over, you're flying home and you're getting out of there. So I just feel very sorry for the Olympians, particularly those, you know, who are probably, this was their only shot at it, and they may even not be in as good shape now as they would have been a year ago. This is not the Olympic experience that they should be having. And I know it's great for them to be able to say for the rest of their lives they are Olympians, and that is a hugely, you know, special distinction to have. But these games are going to be games like no other.
Johnny, I'm very torn on how to think about all these things like the Lions Tour and the Olympics. They're generally been described as money grabs, and I've no doubt that money is part of this. I think in the case of the South African Rugby Federation, they just are desperate for money to almost stay afloat. So it's almost desperation as opposed to out and out greed. The Olympics obviously generates a huge amount of money. So they're kind of written off, and we're sitting here and we're slamming them, and it's not as, you know, good for the athletes as it should be. But I mean, a part of me accepts that, but also thinks, well, nothing is as good as it should be, and like it's nobody's fault that we're living with COVID. People are just doing their best here to try and have some kind of Olympics, have some kind of Lions Tour, and there are going to be hitches along the way. I wonder, should we all be a bit more understanding about that?
I'm the same as you. I'm torn between, well, like when you see a line in that piece that Shane wrote, that is another mitigation against an outbreak that could end the dream of an entire team. I mean, that just seems so bonkers if you go back to pre-COVID times. We are living in truly extraordinary situations. But like, I wasn't aware when Vinny references that he's an underlying condition there, just for example. And when you consider, you know, that there are, what do we say, 26 outbreaks in the Lions squad, and if you consider then, you know, the close contacts of those and the potential for somebody else then to get it who does have an underlying condition, it does make me wonder, do they really care about the human costs of the people involved, and is it essentially about just keeping the show on the road because they have to for money reasons? I don't know. Like, I think the Olympics will, I think a lot of people will watch with a lot less interest because they know a lot of people will think that this should not be going ahead. I've sympathy for the athletes because, as Vinny says, it might be our last chance, but I don't know. I think like everyone else, I just want this to be over now. And, you know, I think we should, from the racing and kind of football perspective, it does remind you how lucky we've been that the show has been able to go on, you know.
Last word for you, Vincent. This will be the last mention of COVID, I suspect, thankfully, for this paper review. That balance between money grab and this is all wrong and the human cost versus everybody's just doing their best here to try and continue some way normally. And I do have sympathy to the latter argument as well, I must say.
I think the problem is the whole business model of an Olympics that I have a problem with, Joe, and it's a business model that indemnifies the IOC against anything. So the IOC, no matter what happened here, we're not going to be out of pocket. The Japanese government were going to be hugely out of pocket. So they have to honour all of the contractual obligations, as in television and that. And that was going to fall back on the Japanese, and accordingly on the Japanese people. That's the problem I have with the whole business model of an Olympics, which has always been weighed so heavily in the favour of the IOC. And I remember distinctly leaving Rio after the games there. And if you remember 2 years earlier, they'd had the World Cup in Brazil as well. And the people, having seen what happened to them, what happened to their country financially through hosting the World Cup, and then seeing these architectural confections being built for a two-week extravaganza. And I remember specifically as the bus was pulling out of the Olympic Park and seeing all of these stunning structures that had been built to host these games, and knowing that this impoverished city was going to take all of that financial heartbreak on board, and the IOC would get into their business class seats and fly out of there, never to be seen again. That's the problem I have with the Olympics, Joe.
Yeah, on that wider point, I'm with you, yeah.
Where does Qatar fit in then in the World Cup? Like, they're building stadia for what exactly? Like, who are ever going to go to these games again? Like, it's sick when you think of that, and like the whole indifference of the locals because they can't even afford to go to these Olympic events in Rio.
Yeah,
I suppose the difference is, the poor people are building the stadiums in Qatar, but there's huge wealth in Qatar as well, Johnny.
There's nobody to go to games, Vinny.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you totally. But in a place like Brazil, the amount of poverty in a city like Rio is breathtaking. And for the bill for the Olympic Games to fall on local people when they can't even get the most basic living conditions, it's an outrage. But it's happened. It's a recurring theme with the Olympics.
No, it is. And I think athletes have had to sign a waiver should they die as a result of COVID, just so the IOC are indemnified. So it's that kind of a situation for sure. Be under no illusion the IOC is looking after the IOC. That's the starting point, I suspect. We'll take a short break. There's loads more to talk to Vincent Hogan and Johnny Ward about. We'll just check in with Andy Moran at McHale Park before going to a quick ad break. Andy, how are we looking now? Mayo still in control, I presume?
Yeah, Joe, it's 2-11 here to 2 points, and it's just really, really comfortable. Like, I think the two goals can symbolise the game, if I'm being honest with you. The first one, a ball dropped short in on top from a mark, dropped short in on top of Rory Byrne. He catches it. Mayo go up and get a goal. Darren Cohn takes it very well. And the second goal comes from Rory Byrne, again catching the ball high over the bar, and it goes the whole way up the pitch to get the second goal from Darren McHale. And they're just after cracking in a third goal there. Again, Darren McHale showing his worth with his second goal of the game. So it's 3-11 here to Mayo, 2 points to Leitrim.
Okay, we'll take a short break. It's, a perfect timing there, because certainly the lack of competitiveness in the championship has been discussed in the papers again, as you can imagine. We've loads more to get through. There's an interview with John Robbie over in South Africa. There's England-Italy build-up. There is GAA. There's Galileo, who passed away. Paul Kimmage on the Oireachtas hearing on horse racing. Liam Brady interview. Paul McGinley talking golf. More besides. Back in 1 second.
The Sunday Papers on Off the Ball. Tech Talk with Jess Kelly.
On the latest Tech Talk, would the right to repair make fixing your devices easier or lead to a host of new headaches? Alex Cooney of CyberSafe Kids will explain the new online safety boot camps they're running this summer. Plus, we'll hear about the newly unveiled Nintendo Switch.
Tech Talk with Jess Kelly.
Thanks to Think. Visit thinkpm.ie.
Listen and subscribe to the podcast now at newstalk.com or on the Newstalk app, powered by GoLoud.
Volkswagen's 0% PCP finance offer makes it even easier to enjoy that 100% confident feeling you get from driving a new Volkswagen. That's 0% on the Polo, the Golf, the new Tiguan, and even the all-electric ID3, plus many more. For a 0% PCP finance offer that gives you 100% confidence, search Volkswagen 212. Finance provided by way of hire purchase agreement from Volkswagen Financial Services Ireland and subject to lending criteria. Terms and conditions apply. Visit Volkswagen.ie for further information.
Having a flutter? Top tip, QuinBet.com. Ireland's newest online sportsbook and casino. For all your horse racing, football, casino and more, QuinBet has you covered. With live in-play markets on mobile, PC and app. QuinBet.com. Terms and conditions apply. Gamble responsibly. Visit gambleaware.ie.
Sean, what's that thing going round the garden?
That is our new Husqvarna Automower.
Automower?
Yeah, it's a robotic lawnmower from Husqvarna. Cuts the grass automatically, has GPS tracking and an app. Even works in the rain. I just thought, why spend time cutting grass when I could spend it with the family?
Great! You can put the dinner on, so...
no can do, love. Have to paint the man cave.
Husqvarna Automower. Never mow again. Learn more at husqvarna.ie.
In a world where they said it couldn't be done, the impossible has been achieved. They've taken the perfect chicken breast sandwich and made it even perfecter. More perfect. Really, really better. How did they do this?
Could I have bacon and cheese on that, please?
That's right. A little extra sizzle is now in store. Supermac's new chicken breast sandwich. The best just got better with bacon and cheddar.
You deserve more than a bank. At On Post Money, we understand that big decisions are easier to make when things work with you, not against. So whether you want to get a new car or convert that empty attic into an office, you'll find the lowest rate on personal loans over 15k and our simple process. Visit onpost.com/loans or your local post office. Lending criteria, terms and conditions apply. New applications only. Info correct as of 1st of July 2021. Source ccpc.ie for Ireland's lowest rate. On Post acts as a credit intermediary on behalf of Avantcard DAC. On Post trading as On Post Money is authorised as a credit intermediary by the CCPC. Avantcard DAC trading as Avant Money is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.
If you're aged 30 to 34, you'll be offered your free COVID-19 vaccine next. You can register now on hse.ie. When it's time for your vaccine, we'll send you a text with your appointment time and location. You'll be invited to get your vaccine at a HSE vaccination centre. If you can't register online, you can call us on 1850 24 1850. To register or to find out more about your COVID-19 vaccine, go to hse.ie. From the HSE.
What's the best way to predict your future? At IT Sligo, we can help you create it. Take the next step forward and choose from over 150 part-time online courses. Be empowered to create, change and build your future. Work hard and thrive with a flexible learning experience designed to suit you. Expand your mind, your options and your career. Make your future happen with online learning at IT Sligo. Apply now at itsligo.ie/online learning.
The Sunday Papers on Off the Ball.
You're very welcome back. We have Johnny Ward and Vincent Hogan going through the Sunday Papers. So last check in there with Andy Moran had Mayo 3-11, Leitrim 2 points. And we're 35 minutes gone in that game. So it's been over and really was over for a long time. Last night, of course, Kerry beat Tip by 11 points. Cork beat Limerick by 8. Tyrone beat Cavan by 8. And as Colin O'Rourke points out, Johnny, in some respects it's great to have something to talk about apart from the matches. He's talking about Stephen Cluxton here, but he says it's great to have something else to talk about aside from the matches, because there are 17 counties down and still we haven't had a game between any of the contenders. The quality of football has been dire. It's hardly going to get much better today when Mayo and Leitrim meet. This is last year's All-Ireland finalists taking on supposed equals Leitrim, who failed to win a game in the Alliance Football League, beaten by Antrim, Louth and Sligo. Just in case you may have forgotten, Mayo gave Sligo such a beating that it'll probably be very difficult to create any interest in young men putting on a Sligo jersey for a long time to come. It should not be like this. Nobody in the GAA takes any satisfaction from humiliation. And he mentioned special Congress in November will give everyone a chance to see whether the cold light of what is happening now will deliver or will deliver change, or will self-interest and worse still, self-preservation prevail. So I don't know, this football championship, whatever bit of magic was in the air last year with Cavan and Tipperary doing strange things and it gave knockout a certain kind of jeopardy, it's business as usual now, and with no back door, we're just not getting any games at the moment. This football championship thus far has been fairly grim going.
Yeah, he says just at the end of what you read out there, another car crash awaits today. And as he was talking about Sligo there, I was reminded of a couple of things. I was in Sligo a year or two ago, and I passed the Centre of Excellence, and I was with a Sligo Rovers player, Sligo Rovers footballer, and he said to me, like, that's a great facility, but he just wonders what is the actual point of this. And I spoke to Sligo Rovers, the head of their academy, Conor O'Grady, recently, and they've brought massive success from players underage into Sligo Rovers. But on the flip side, Sligo football is in an awful state. And you look at that game, Mayo and Leitrim today, I was minded of being in Tuam Stadium when I was growing up, watching the likes of Declan Darcy, watching Leitrim beat Galway. That what they did in 1994, I think, is one of the most amazing sporting events ever in Ireland. And if you haven't listened to Kevin Brannigan, did a kind of an audio review of it, like I guess a podcast, and spoke to the people involved and spoke to what it meant to the people of Leitrim, and you'd nearly be crying at the end of it. But that day is gone, unfortunately. That day is gone, and there is no way you can bridge the gap between the professionalism of the senior counties and the likes of Leitrim and Sligo, whose players clearly are, they know that there's nothing in store for them in the championship. There's no way they can bridge this gap. They're demoralised before they even start. And Gaelic football at inter-county level, I think it probably has reached tipping point. I know there will be a lot of traditionalists who love the old provincial system, and it was great to see what happened last year. But we've come to the point where it's really damaging, I think, the brand. It's damaging the legacy of these great games that we've had down the year, where anyone going to Castlebar today, knew what was in store. Even a Mayo fan is not going to enjoy that. It's demoralising for Leitrim, but it's damaging to the game of Gaelic football because it's reached a stage where it's so professional, and I think tactics are so strong, and I think coaching is so good that it's virtually impossible for the underdog to win. It just isn't really possible anymore. For the likes of Leitrim to even make a game of it today against Mayo just isn't possible. And I don't know what they're going to do, but I imagine it'll turn into a league system kind of trumping the championship down the line or something, because this championship format is not sustainable at all. And I have to say, I've never been less interested in the All-Ireland football series than I am this year, and partly it is because nothing has happened yet, and as you say, 17 teams are gone.
Yes. Well, the shortened season, the absence of the qualifiers exacerbate the problem, and I take your point about people love the provincial championships. They certainly love the idea of them. The reality is pretty unlovable at the moment. Vincent, if the first half is replicated there in McHale Park, I think the final score will be about 40 points Mayo to Leitrim 6, which is where we are. I was trying to think, has it been this bad before? Is it just the absence of the qualifiers is making it seem especially grim at the moment? It feels like it's about as bad a season as I can remember.
Yeah, it's hard to remember it being more tepid at this stage, Joe. And I think the thing that's dragging it all down is this adherence to a provincial structure that's not really fit for purpose. And I'm not going to go back into that because people have talked this to death. But there was this artificial feeling to last year where Cavan won Ulster basically because Donegal were complacent, and Tipperary won Munster basically because Kerry were complacent against Cork. They were trying to come up with a game plan for the Dubs without actually dealing with the business in front of them. And there is this profound sense now that there's an inevitable All-Ireland final looming between Dublin and Kerry, and that really will be all that matters in this championship. Yes, there will be 4 provincial champions. Dublin and Kerry will be 2 of them, and those provincial titles will mean virtually nothing to them. In Ulster, an Ulster title will always mean something. And a Connacht title, we're going to have a Mayo-Galway final. There'll be a bit of an edge to that, but it's just being dragged down by the provincial structure. And the provincial councils are very powerful within the GA, and they're going to hang on for dear life to their own championships. But I think until and unless we bite the bullet with this and change the whole structure of the championship. Right now, you have Dublin and Kerry, and then there seems to be a gap even to the Mayos, particularly with Cillian O'Connor out for the season, and Donegal's. And then there's another gap. So there's all these different layers of the championship. And the best football we see is in the National League because they're playing their own standards in games. But a game like this, I was watching the Sligo Mayo game, and it was just boring after 10 minutes. And it sounds like this one is very similar.
It does, yeah. I mean, the floating younger voter who's interested in various sports, I don't really see what the attraction of the football championship is anymore. I think you could really realistically say if you watch Dublin Kerry in the end, that's all you kind of really need to must see. Yeah. Unfortunately, which is crazy. On the same page as that Colin O'Rourke piece, O'Rourke is largely writing about the Stephen Cluxton situation, and he's really making the point that has been made. You would think a quick phone call, he says, could tidy all of this up. Are you in or are you out? It's hardly an unreasonable request to make of the captain, is what Colin O'Rourke says. Dermot Crowe writes a very interesting piece, I think. So he outlines the situation. He outlines what Dessie Farrell said last week. He talks about Cluxton as a man of principle in certain instances. So he starts off by remembering that in Parnell's, Cluxton was capable of springing surprises too. 7 years ago, he requested to be regraded to the second team because, he says, at that time Parnell's had a cast of inter-county footballers from outside Dublin and a naked ambition to achieve success quickly. But behind the success, the club was facing financial ruin despite a huge windfall after the sale of former grounds near Dublin Airport. The culture within Parnell's at the time could not have been more removed from the kind of values which Cluxton and Dublin espoused. The club did not back his request, and he sent a stinging letter to the executive. And so a Parnell source says he wanted to play with his friends. He was promised a regrade. It didn't happen. He wasn't comfortable with the way the senior team was going with all the imports, and a lot of his friends would have been on the junior team, so he wanted to play with them. And then Dermot Crowe writes, and this is the interesting part, Cluxton has trained with Dublin this year on a couple of occasions. Sources claim that the breach of COVID restrictions by the Dublin panel, which resulted in a 12-week ban for Dessie Farrell, created tension in the relationship between Cluxton and the manager. So I don't know what's going on with Stephen Cluxton. That's one source, one report. Who knows what his reasons are? I'm sure they are something to do with his body as well. But that was an interesting line, I have to say, Johnny, buried towards the end of Dermot Crowe's piece here.
It's really intriguing in terms of this whole debate, which, you know, I think if it weren't so uninteresting, Gaelic football, in terms of Dublin's dominance in many respects, the press would be all over this. Cluxton is definitely one of the most enigmatic characters in Irish sport. As Colin O'Rourke says, rarely gives interviews and so forth, but that reference about Parnell's, where basically he was fed up that they were bringing in these outsiders and his mates were basically being disenfranchised by it, probably typical of the man. He totally doesn't want the limelight, but I wasn't aware, I have to say, at all of the potential that was that kind of the COVID breach that may have caused a chasm. But in terms of, you know, Vinny's on about Kerry being in the All-Ireland, you know, and maybe nobody else, but if you are reading this, considering the talismanic figure that he's been, considering he's been the heart and soul of so much that Dublin have done, you would get a lot of hope, because this is definitely unsettling. And as they referenced, Dessie Farrell has to deal with this pretty much every week, whereas Cluxton, is he coming back? What's the crack with Cluxton? And there doesn't seem to be any straight answer, because if it is true that the COVID breach were an issue, I mean, that's deeply embarrassing for Dessie Farrell.
Well, it is, yeah. And again, it's one source, who knows? But I agree with you, it would be. Vincent, what's your read on the whole situation? It's all very strange.
It's very strange. That line that Dermot uses about him wanting to be regraded within Parnell's because there were too many non-Dublin players coming in, I mean, that would very much tie in with the perception of Stephen Cluxton over the years, and the way his teammates would talk about him, that he would have a certain sense of integrity. But this is becoming a circus. And, you know, it strikes me that everything that's described of Stephen Cluxton comes back to one thing, and that is he doesn't like the limelight. But look at the papers. His not coming out and providing clarity on this is putting him completely in the limelight. There's a line in Colin O'Rourke's piece that I find interesting. He's talking about Cluxton and likening him in personality to Jim Gavin, and I can see why he'd say that. But he says, they immersed themselves in doing their jobs to the maximum of their ability, but did not think it made them much, if any, different from any other GA person. Well, everything about what Cluxton is doing now, or not doing more pointedly, is kind of conveying himself as being different. And, you know, Colm says a simple phone call would resolve this. Well, that's assuming that the phone call is answered. And I'm not sure what level of communication has happened between Stephen Cluxton and Dessie Farrell. But what I would say categorically is he's clearly not going to come back this year. You cannot bring someone in at this stage and say to Evan Comerford, Evan, you're back on the bench. That would contravene everything that Stephen Cluxton supposedly stands for. So we're assuming he's not coming back this year. Dessie Farrell, who's going to be asked again after Dublin's next game, what's the story, any word from Cluxton? Dessie should come out categorically for his own point of view and say, Evan is my goalkeeper this year. Stephen has not retired, maybe back next year, we don't know, but he's not going to be involved this year. Dessie has to say that. He's got to come out and bring clarity to it if Stephen Cluxton himself isn't going to bring clarity to it. And you saw it, you know, Cluxton is playing centre-back for Parnell's on the other night in the Division 3 game, and there's a photographer there. There's going to be a photographer everywhere he goes. Stephen Cluxton, we're told, doesn't like the limelight. There's a very simple way of getting out of it.
Yeah, because he doesn't have to retire. He could just say, I'm out for this season.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I don't know. It's the plot thickens. What we were saying is like the Streisand effect during the week. Ironically, this absolute desire to not be talked about makes him one of the most talked about footballers in the country, I would think. So we'll see where that goes. Two racing stories to touch on. So page 25 of the Sunday Times, Johnny, Coolmore pays tribute after death of Galileo. It's quite a short piece, to be honest. Galileo's death obviously just announced. One of the most influential horses in the history of flat racing has died. Galileo won the Derby, went on to become the dominant stallion of the modern era, was put to sleep yesterday at the age of 23. This was owing to a chronic injury or debilitating situation in his left forefoot, so put to sleep at the age of 23. Born In 1998, trained by Aidan O'Brien, Galileo produced a brilliant classic season in 01, won the Derby, the Irish Derby at the Curragh and the King George at Ascot. It was in retirement, however, that he proved even more successful for his owners, the Coolmore Syndicate. John Magnier, it's a very sad day. So Galileo sired 91 Group 1 winners, Frankel being the most famous of all, while 20 then of his sons have produced top-level winners of their own. His stallion fee remained a closely guarded secret, but reports estimated it to have been as high as £600,000 sterling. By covering more than 150 mares each breeding season, that would have made Galileo worth about £100 million sterling to Coolmore every year. I mean, the figures are just staggering. The ownership of Galileo was licensed to print 100 million sterling every year.
Yeah, it's very hard to kind of put a figure on this because Coolmore would have had obviously the breeding rights to Galileo, so they kind of had dominance over the mares that would be sent to him. And, you know, down the years as well, there was a kind of I guess there was a bit of a war going on between Coolmore and Godolphin, so there wasn't much of a cross kind of mating going on from the two respective kind of breeding lines. So it's impossible to quantify what he was worth to Coolmore, but whatever it is, the figure will probably understate it because of the legacy as well and the stallions that he's produced. And the whole story of Galileo is to me it's completely remarkable. And you've all these sliding doors moments where Vincent O'Brien in the 60s goes over to America. He basically is advised to look at this horse and doesn't really like the horse. He's a yearling. He says, there's anything else for me to have a look at. He looks at this yearling that's by a little known stallion at that time, even though I think he'd won the Kentucky Derby, called Northern Dancer. And he said, yeah, I like that horse. He persuaded the American owner to buy him, and the horse turned out to be Nijinsky. And because of Nijinsky, Northern Dancer became the dominant stallion line and produced Sadler's Wells, and Sadler's Wells produced Galileo. And this all came from Vincent O'Brien taking a liking to this yearling in the States in the 60s. But we'll talk about Galileo's influence is just, it extends and it extends and it extends. And what's kind of remarkable, we're going to talk about Jim Bulger, obviously. Jim Bulger won 2 guineas this year, one with Poetic Flair and one with Max Sweeney. And when Poetic Flair won when he won the English Guineas, Poetic Flair is by Dawn Approach. Dawn Approach is by New Approach. New Approach is by Galileo. So you had to go back that far. And when he won the Irish Guineas, he won it with Max Sweeney, who's by Teofilo. Teofilo is by Galileo. And as much as Galileo will go down as one of the most successful stallions of all time, this is what's really strange in the story, is that despite the fact that he was an unbelievable racehorse, and when he was beaten by Fantastic Light in Leopardstown 20 years ago, apparently there were around 20,000 people at Leopardstown that day for a flat meet, which is completely unheard of now. It was real box office stuff. But initially at stud, he wasn't going very well, and they dropped his stallion fee, I think, from 50 grand to 37.5, which now seems absolutely incredible. Jim Bulger went there and he said, I don't care about this, I'm going to invest in Galileo. And he's had a load of success since, even though he's probably not flavour of the month with Coolmore at the moment.
Johnny, how common is it for a good to average horse to produce incredible offspring, and vice versa?
Good to average horses do not go to stud. So essentially, if you go to stud, in rare circumstances, Frankel's half brother will go to stud based on his pedigree. The same with Monjou. His half brother went to stud even though he never raced. Essentially, you have to be an extremely high standard. And if you go through like all the Derby winners, even if you win a Derby, the chances are you're not going to be necessarily a successful stallion. It really is Darwinism. It is the survival of the fittest, and that's why Coolmore have been so dominant, because they've been able to use Galileo, and others just aren't able to afford it or don't have access to him. But there's a small group of stallions that have a huge role, and there's no guarantee Poetic Flair, who won the Derby or won the Guineas, no guarantee he'll make it at stud. He was by a stallion, Dawn Approach, who was basically written off completely as a stallion, was worth very little, and that's an outlier, but it's very rare. I mean, it's a small selection of stallions that have kind of all the influence. And what's been interesting as well, Joe, is that Frankel has come along. Frankel is by far the best horse that Galileo has ever produced, and he has exploded as a stallion over the last sort of couple of months. He's had 2 Derby winners. He's had the winner of the Falmouth the other night, and maybe he is now the successor to Galileo. But I suppose lastly on this, when I was in Coolmore, Galileo's daddy, Sadler's Wells, I remember years ago, and he was coming to the end at that time, although he was still covering mares. And I said to your man, how many mares does he cover a day now, Sadler's Wells? And he says to me, oh, he covers 1, but to be honest, he'd like to cover a few more. But towards the end, Galileo, by all accounts, he was just running out, and he got sick, and he got a humane death. But, to be honest, it deserved an awful lot more coverage in the papers. When Prince Philip died at the age of whatever it was, there were probably supplements to him. This horse was absolute racing royalty, and the legacy will be, Galileo's legacy will outlive me, for example. It'll be a bigger legacy than that of Aidan O'Brien, and it probably did deserve, a bit more coverage, I think, in the papers. But maybe that's where racing's at.
Well, I mean, it's a hell of a comparison, Prince Philip to a horse, but I'll take the point.
It wasn't going down that particular route, but they were both royalty, put it that way.
Okay. Let's check in with Andy Moran then. What minute are we in, Andy? And I'm afraid to ask, what's the score?
No, just second half, just thrown in there. 3-11 to 4, still the same, Joe. Yeah, listen, the first half was what it was. I think he talked about it through it there, and everything he said was kind of true in terms of the performance levels here. Mayo have ripped Leitrim apart. Oisin Mullen coming from centre half back. Ryan O'Donoghue first, and Tommy Conroy first 15 minutes were outstanding, and then Darren Cohn and Darren McHale just took over the last few minutes. So they could be in for another goal here. Matty Rowan, great save by the keeper. Darren Cohn has it. Across the goal. I think the goal chance is gone. Conor Loftus takes a point. So yeah, it started off, Joe, the same way as the first half ended.
Very good, thanks, Andy. Final pieces with Vincent Hogan and Johnny Ward in just a sec.
The Sunday Papers on Off the Ball. Introducing the all-new Citroën C4. Available in petrol, diesel and 100% electric. The C4 crossover features our very best in comfort, safety and technology as standard. Experience suspension with progressive hydraulic cushions and advanced comfort seats. You can also take comfort in a 5-year warranty and flexible payment options too. The new Citroën C4. Put some comfort in your life. See citroen.ie. Citroën.
Ready to get back into the swing of things? Well, it's officially tea time in Northern Ireland. With some of the world's best golf courses on your doorstep, there's never been a better time to explore while staying local. With tons of great value stay and play packages. Play a few rounds in a historic course, treat yourself to a decadent spa visit, or visit some of the best 19th holes around. Book today to see how Northern Ireland is made for golf, and a whole lot more at discovernorthernireland.com/golf.
Afternoons are easy with InsureMyVan.ie, Ireland's low-cost van insurance specialist. Get your business back on the road with InsureMyVan's best price guarantee. For super savings, visit InsureMyVan.ie. City Financial Marketing Group Limited, trading as InsureMyVan.ie, is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.
Home may be where the heart is, but as lockdown ends, it's the one place most of us plan not to be. Thankfully, when you're out, PhoneWatch will always be home. And now, PhoneWatch comes with motion-activated indoor and outdoor HD cameras. Added protection that lets you keep an eye on things with crystal-clear HD video streaming straight to your phone. Make yours a smarter, safer home. Get the new high-tech PhoneWatch home safety system with HD video at phonewatch.ie.
There are places where no planes will ever land. Lands that no trains will ever crisscross, where instead you travel from left to right across white plains. This summer, discover a world without travel restrictions. Escape into a great Irish book. Take the van to Barrytown. Journey to Brooklyn via the Star of the Sea. Or board the night boat to Tangier. Find your summer read now at onpost.com/readers wanted. On Post, proud sponsor of the Irish Book Awards.
Your to-do list. It's always pretty chock-a-block. There's the things from yesterday you never got to yesterday, and the things for today you'll probably put off till tomorrow. But don't put off saving on your home energy. Go direct to Energia and switch to Energia's cheapest dual fuel bundle. For the biggest savings, the thing to do is to always go direct. Visit energia.ie. Energia, the power behind your savings. EAB €1,665 based on average annual usage. 12-month contract, discounted unit rates, standing charge, PSO levy and carbon tax, T's and C's and early termination fee apply. Valid from July 2021 and subject to change. Verification and T's and C's at energia.ie/EAB.
If you're currently receiving the COVID-19 pandemic unemployment payment, this is an important message for you. To continue to receive this payment, you must confirm your eligibility before the 20th of July. The quickest and easiest way to do this is online at www.mywelfare.ie. For more information, visit gov.ie/DSP COVID-19 or call the Income Support Helpline on 1890 800 024. Brought to you by the Government of Ireland.
News Talk already gives you your daily fix of news and entertainment. But wouldn't you like a little bit more? News Talk Extra is everything you might have missed, plus expert tips, podcasts and competitions, all straight to your inbox. Subscribe now at newstalk.com/extra. Across Ireland, this is the IMRO Radio Awards National Station of the Year. This is News Talk.
It's 3 o'clock. Good afternoon. I'm Ross Lynch. The Health Minister says he has full confidence in Micheál Martin as party leader and believes internal bickering is bad for Fianna Fáil. Stephen Donnelly's comments follow calls from Barry Cowan for a special meeting to analyse the party's poor performance in the Dublin Bay South by-election. Sligo Leitrim TD Mark McSherry has also called on Micheál Martin to resign. However, Minister Donnelly doesn't agree the Taoiseach should step down.
I have full confidence in Micheál Martin. I think he's doing a really good job in what is an incredibly difficult period for the country.
Allowing unvaccinated under-18s access indoor dining could lead to a rise in COVID-19 cases in younger people, according to an immunology expert. Cabinet will meet tomorrow to sign off on plans to reopen indoor dining later this month, likely to be the 26th of July. Proposals include restricting those who are over 18 from accessing venues if they aren't vaccinated or recently recovered from the virus. Kingston Mills, Professor of Immunology at Trinity College Dublin, says the rules run the risk of it spreading between children and unvaccinated staff.
They're thinking all the time about the people who are going to the pubs and restaurants, but not about the staff, and very often the staff are young, and many of them won't have been vaccinated. So that's the risk for them, and they have to serve these people, and they're getting, close enough to them.
Gardaí in County Donegal are appealing for information on a white van after a 34-year-old woman died in a hit and run overnight. Emergency services were called to the scene on the N15 at Town Parks in Lifford in the early hours of this morning. The van and its driver are yet to be found, and officers are appealing for them to come forward. Meanwhile, 2 men in their 20s are in a critical condition in hospital following a crash in County Limerick. The 2-car collision happened on the N21 near Abbeyfield at 11:30 last night. Finally, Richard Branson's first space flight has been delayed due to weather. The Virgin Galactic's owner is testing the private astronaut experience in the company first fully crewed, which will be joined by 2 pilots and 3 mission specialists. He'll now join the launch at 3:30 this afternoon. It's 2 minutes past 3.
News Talk Weather.
Thanks to Ryanair. School's out. Time for a family holiday in Spain, Italy, Portugal and Greece.
Rather cloudy with rain at times. Sunny spells developing in many parts of the country later on. Highs of 16 to 20 degrees. And now you're up to date on News Talk.
The Sunday Papers on Off the Ball.
You're very welcome, Max. So final thoughts from Vincent Hogan, Chief Sportswriter with the Irish Independent. Johnny Ward with us as well, racing journalist, often here talking football on Saturdays as well and more besides. In McHale Park, it's Mayo 4-12, Leitrim 4 points, second half just underway. So that is a 20-point lead for Mayo, 24 points to 4 at the moment in the Connacht semi-final. We were talking Galileo before the news headlines there. Another horse racing story, and it's a continuation of a theme really from Paul Kimmage in the Sunday Independent, page 21 here. He watched with interest, as I suspect you did as well, Johnny, the Oireachtas hearing on the horse racing industry. In short, it would seem that we might be headed for an interesting conversation between Lynn Hillier, who is the IHRB, that's the Irish Horse Racing Regulatory Body's Chief Veterinary Officer, and Paul Kimmage down the line. So the piece concludes with her saying she'd be happy to chat with Paul at a later date. He says deal, so that could be incoming. In effect here, Paul lays out the contributions of Brian Kavanagh, who's the HRI, Horse Racing Ireland Chief Executive, Dennis Egan, the outgoing IHRB Chief Executive, and Lynn Hillier. They're all very upset with the reporting of the problems in the horse racing industry. As a veterinary surgeon and a scientist, when the truth is not reported correctly, it grates. I'm hoping this morning we can set some of those facts straight, is what Lynn Hillier said to the Oireachtas Committee. In effect, one of their contentions is that Paul Kimmage has spoke with Jim Bulger. One of the interesting bits from Jim Bulger was that an English trainer had been on to him saying that the trainer had bought 6 horses and had run tests of his own, expensive tests at that, and 3 of the horses from Ireland had returned adverse findings, and this was something rejected by the IHRB. For instance, in the 42, it's quoted here in Paul Kimmage's piece. Kimmage's piece asserted that an English trainer found 3 of 6 horses he acquired in Ireland to have shown evidence of a number of currently unidentified possible keto steroids. In a rather unusual step, both the IHRB and British Horse Racing Authority said samples carried out proved the claims were rubbish. So Paul Kimmage has spoken to that British trainer in this piece, who says of the rejection of his claim, it wasn't that they found nothing, far from it. There was just a difference of opinion on how to interpret the results. So the plot thickens. I mean, I didn't realise there would be various ways to interpret these results. I thought they were just merely scientific results and it was positive or negative, but it now seems there's a difference of opinion on how to interpret the results. And then Paul Kimmage returns to Thursday, and across the course of Thursday the point was made that the organisation, the IHRB, and Paul Kimmage had communications, and Paul makes the point that they were only initiated by him, never them. It wasn't like they got on to him last week and asked about the list of doped horses, 24 in total, which had been sent to the paper. Nobody was in touch with him about that, but he's reached out to Lynn Hillier and she said they'll talk at a further date. So, Johnny, we're in a bit of a holding pattern. I'm sure this is the talk of the racing industry still. Jim Bulger very much standing by his comments. And, well, I look forward to that chat with Lynn Hillier and Paul Kimmage for sure. But holding pattern, I think, Johnny, there wasn't much out of the Oireachtas Committee, which caused huge waves beyond the various bodies, the IHRB and Horse Racing Ireland, standing their ground.
Yeah, I suppose a few things on this. I wrote the 42 piece, and yeah, so well, it's just in its important context, because when I said the claims were rubbish, I probably could have used better terminology than that. But essentially, the BHA and the IHRB, apparently, according to themselves and according to Lynn Hillier, they did this extremely diligent testing and they didn't find anything. Now, the toxicologist of that trainer, I don't know. I'm like you. I don't know anything really about drugs. I don't know what the best testing is. I know that hair sampling is probably the best way to go, in the sense that you can prove that a horse might have been injected with something in his or her lifetime. But a few other points on this. Lynn Hillier does not tend to give interviews, and a lot of journalists have spoken to me about her being very hard to nail down in terms of interviews, so I wouldn't necessarily hold your breath on that interview she may or may not do with Kimmage, but if she does, it'll be great stuff. I have to hail Paul Kimmage, because I think this is proper. You buy the Sunday newspaper to see what Paul Kimmage is writing about racing. I think newspapers are in a difficult place now where people don't buy them. A lot of people probably don't subscribe to the Sunday Independent since the Independent went subscription. But stuff like this would make everyone want to read it. And I really have to hail Kimmage on this. I think some of the stuff he's done has been very good. Some of it has been very speculative, but he's definitely, I think this is a very interesting article, because there's a contradiction in terms of what Lynn Hillier said at the Oireachtas hearing and what Kimmage's understanding is of it. I did try to find out today if he were aware, because he's given a timeline of events here from September 16th of last year. The trainer delivers his report to the BHA, and he says the BHA delivered a final report on December 15th. I've tried to find out if Paul Kimmage knew this before his piece last Sunday, because it would have been a very strange thing to leave out, because he didn't mention it, but I haven't been able to find that out, so I'll obviously have to reserve judgment on that. But it's intriguing stuff, Joe. Everyone in racing is talking about it. Nobody can seem to tell me anything apart from there are suspicions. One owner says to me this morning, he sent me a WhatsApp, he said, stay on the right side of this story, and by that he would mean the Paul Kimmage side. He thinks that drugs are rampant in racing. I've seen no proof of this whatsoever. It's a massively well-kept secret if it is going on. Jim Bulger has had long-term animosity with the Turf Club going back a long time. He did speak to me off the record about these kind of concerns last year, and now they've obviously come on the record. But I just can't, I can't kind of, I guess, furnish people with any more details than what's there, because I'm inclined to believe the BHA, and I can't see why the BHA would try to suppress something. I can't see why it wouldn't deliver a proper report into the alleged drugs of these horses. And it'll be interesting to see what happens. But one thing Jim Bulger has done, he's gotten everyone talking about this, and there's definitely no harm in that, because I can't prove that drugs aren't widespread in racing, but as of yet there's essentially no proof whatsoever that it is widespread, and it's kind of a watch this space for me.
Well, I think that's very much it, isn't it, Vincent? And to see what comes out now in the wash, you have somebody as respected as Jim Bulger making these strong claims, knowing he's 100% right in his own opinion. His stable staff are telling him, you're absolutely 100% right. We're talking to people who work in stables all around the country, and you're onto something here. And last week, Paul Kimmage had anecdotal reports of letters written and sent to the racing authorities outlining, this trainer has all of these substances in this cabinet, and I was shown them, and they're in his office. Go and look. And so you've that side of it, and then you've the racing authorities saying there's absolutely nothing to see here. Now, these are not mutually exclusive. Someone's wrong here.
Yeah, someone's wrong. I was very struck. I mean, I didn't watch the committee hearing, but I did watch snippets of Lynn Hillier on the 6-1 News, and I was very struck by how stridently she spoke, and this sense of almost hurt for the sport that she was trying to communicate. But then you read this piece, and there's a lot of grey areas in this, and I think you mentioned it already, Joe. A really interesting line for me is that every contact Paul has had with the IHRB has been initiated by himself. Now, he's been on this story for weeks with Jim Bulger. And when someone of the calibre of Jim Bulger comes out and says what he says, I can only imagine it's like a bomb going off in that sport. And this is not going away. And I find it interesting that they have made no efforts to contact Paul and talk about what he knows or what he has been told. So yeah, it's going to run and run, this story, I suspect, and it's not a good look for the sport. And I think particularly Jim Bulger's line that there will be a Lance Armstrong moment. That's a very, very damning suggestion about the sport as it's run at the moment.
Yes, sometimes lines like that stick, and that one has stuck. And again, when you say Lance Armstrong was winning everything around him. So did he mean a direct comparison as in the most successful, or did he not? I don't know. So, there's still a vagueness to it, and legally, Jim Bulger said himself, you have to be vague, but it's hanging over the sport now in a big way. We had Ger Lyons on the show a couple of weeks ago. He's a trainer, and he said he's often winning races, and now people will text him and say, oh, are you up to no good as well? And he obviously said he absolutely is abiding by all the rules. But his point was almost, look, you hear things, but it's always vague and it's often jokey and there's black humour. But he said if Jim Bulger is saying this, then we all have to stop and listen. I don't know.
The other thing, Joe, so I spoke to Ger Lyons at that time last year as well, and I'm happy to say that now because he's been on the record since. And his point was, well, I'm not cheating, so how can I be beating, these top trainers and all the best trainers in the world if I'm not cheating? Essentially, so like that, it's raising doubt. And if you reference Poetic Flair, the horse that I spoke about, Jim Bulger's horse, who was incredibly aggressively campaigned this year. Now, Jim Bulger is clearly not drugging his horses, or he's a very wacky sense of humour, right? So if Poetic Flair, the way he was campaigned and the amazing durability that he showed in nearly winning the Irish Guineas as well as the British Guineas, and the French Guineas, basically the what he showed over those 3 weeks, it just shows that you can do it in terms of a level playing field. But Jim doesn't think the level playing field is there. No. Now, why are the drugs used if they're there? Are they used for injuries? Are they used for performance enhancing? Because they can't show up on the day of the race meeting. It's just a very, very grey area. And in fairness to Jim, the one thing is he's 80 years of age or whatever he is, and he has definitely opened this up as an issue, because I do feel Irish racing at times is happy just to kind of just let things go on and not really look too hard at what is actually going on. So I think he deserves kudos in that regard, and certainly so does Paul Kimmage.
We're also assuming they're performance enhancing on all occasions. I mean, we've seen the Viking Horde situation where it was to do the complete opposite. So I mean, that's just to complicate matters further. The most damning thing Bulger said for me, one, he criticised the lack of appropriate testing, and then it turned out that hair sample testing had been happening since last summer. He was saying he's not so sure that the right actions are being taken after testing. Now, if that is where we are, then this thing is about to blow up in a huge way, because that's scandalous. And obviously the racing authorities, again, are denying those accusations as vehemently as possible. So that is where we are, and everybody's watching this to see where it goes over the next while. That's on page 21 of the Sunday Independent if you're interested. I know lots of people are. We've put this off long enough. England against Italy.
We have to preempt the result now, Joe, for people who are listening on Monday.
You go on then for the Monday audience, Johnny. What happened?
Well, they'll probably say the opposite to what I say, but I think England, to be honest, I think they're the better team. And I was talking to the boy Ronan in the off the ball office during the week, and he was bemoaning how England's style of football, but I actually don't think it's that bad. And it's amazing that history is written by the winners, because Southgate now has been he's practically been knighted by Wayne Rooney in the Sunday Times already, as is Harry Kane. But they kind of blew it a bit, I thought, at the World Cup against Croatia. And, they rode their luck a bit against Denmark. So if they lost to Denmark, what would people be saying? But I have to say, I can already see it all over social media. England can have a field day at Wembley, is beside Rooney's article, which I think is a little bit harsh in what he actually says, but that could be on the Italian wall tonight if they have a kind of a GA manager mindset anyway.
Vincent, only I'd say about 500,000 words written across the Sunday papers in this game. What piece do you want to go with?
I suppose an old colleague of mine, David Walsh, writes an interesting profile of him, Joe, and you get some sense of the personality. And I think why people are a little bit conflicted in Ireland over this is that Gareth Southgate comes across a perfectly decent, intelligent guy who doesn't buy into the cliched aspects of management. And he seems just a really decent individual. And to be fair, I agree with Johnny. I think England have been pretty good to watch. There's some really exciting young players like Mason Mount, Jack Grealish, Jadon Sancho, Sacco, the Arsenal player, all really exciting young talents who are going to be there for a few years. And I, as someone who worked in England, and I worked in England the late 70s, early 80s, when it would have been, English people would have every reason to make your life uncomfortable at the time. There was a lot happening, obviously, with the Troubles, and some of the people I worked with in England for Hater Sports Agency are some of the best people I've ever met. And I would be really happy for them, because I know what it would mean to them for England to finally win a trophy all these years after 66. But then there's the moronic side of the supporters, and they're almost certain to boo the Italian anthem tonight. And as soon as you hear that, something happens. And it struck me, when they were playing Denmark the other night, and I was quite happy for England to win that game, but I let a roar out of me when Denmark scored, and I didn't see that coming, but it just happened. It came out of me sporadically, and I think it's because of the behaviour of some of their supporters. But you can't obviously describe English people as this generic bunch who are all the same. They're very, very different. They're alike.
Vinny, when you say that though, right, so if they say in Kilkenny you're born with a hurl in your hand, are we as Irish sports fans just effectively born and raised with this willingness that England do not win, and we just cannot shake it, regardless of national anthem booing, regardless of how nice the people are? Is it just in us that we don't want England to win?
Yeah, I think it's certainly something like that, Johnny. I mean, I know when I go to Twickenham and I hear swing low, the Chariots swing low, and I instinctively think I'd love them to fall on their faces here. But no, I go back to Southgate, and I think Southgate is a large part of the reason that people are torn here. You've Paul McGrath's piece in the Sunday World where he's talking about him as a former teammate and how decent a guy he was. And in actual fact, because of that decency, Paul couldn't see a future manager in him. But David's piece, there's an interesting line in it, and I don't know if it's David pushing himself into the picture a bit much here, but he talks about when Southgate was playing for Middlesbrough and they were beaten in a match 4-1 by Arsenal, and he's coming away after the match and he gets a text from Southgate. Look, he says, I know we're friends, but I don't want that to affect what you write. I played poorly and you've got to say that.
Yeah.
Now, I can't imagine too many footballers doing that. I would imagine most footballers, most human beings actually, would actually be hoping against hope that a journalist you're friendly with would go easy with you, that he might give you a 7 you didn't deserve rather than the 5 you did. And so I find that's interesting, that it kind of gives you a sense of this guy, what he feels, the level of importance he attaches to a sense of integrity. And I think that's making him a very, very likeable manager.
Yeah, and usually I think you'd find a character like Southgate just too bloody sweet to be wholesome, but it seems very genuine, and it's impossible not to warm to him. And there's some lovely kind of behind the scenes stuff in that Walsh piece, like when Southgate lost his job at Middlesbrough. He hadn't been expecting to lose it because they won that very night when he was told he'd lose the job, and he got home and wife and kids in bed because they knew the team had won, so he was probably okay. And he sat down that evening and made a list of things he would need to return to Middlesbrough, like the car, the mobile phone, the laptop, and listed them all out, which I don't think most of us would be too worried about, but that's what he did. And then the next morning his daughter Mia was upset about the situation, and she was due to speak at school in front of the assembly and didn't want to, obviously, after getting the news her dad was sacked, but her parents explained to her that you have to speak and it's just the right thing to do. And you can kind of imagine that's how the Southgates operate. And David Walsh quotes Sir Martin Samuel, who wrote in the Mail this week, "Don't think of Southgate as a nice guy, but rather as a good guy." And there is a distinction there. So that's Walsh's piece. Rooney's piece is okay. He's had some amazing pieces, Rooney, so I'm holding him to an unbelievably high standard. He was the first fella I flicked towards on the football. It's okay. He talks about, stuff you sort of know anyway, like Harry Kane works really hard in training and Lampard's worked hard in training. Says he's happier that England are playing Italy as opposed to Spain, because Spain would have just owned the ball. I thought if we're talking about insights into Southgate, Graham Souness gives us an unbelievable insight into Mancini and Vialli on page 20 of the Sunday Times. He played for Sampdoria when they were young and coming through, and Souness was like the experienced player, and he was there to kind of help the youngsters through. So Mancini and Vialli, who we still see on the sideline together and hugging, and Vialli thankfully seems to be over a lot of his health issues, and just a great insight. So when I first met a 19-year-old Roberto Mancini at Sampdoria, he reminded me of me at that age. He was petulant, he thought he knew it all, a bit like I'd been at Spurs. Every 10 minutes in training, the arms would go up, the head thrown back in the classic dramatic gesture as if to say, "What are you doing, you fool," if he wasn't happy with you. As you can imagine, that went down well with me, says Souness, and they had exchanged words several times. At one stage, he told Trevor Francis, who had more Italian, to translate that there would be consequences if Mancini spoke to me like that again. And you can kind of imagine that put the end to it. So they became the goal twins, Vialli and Mancini, and very different people. Vialli hung on every word that people were telling him at that age, but Roberto knew everything at the age of 19. He was superior technically, he had all the clubs in his bag, but he didn't work as hard as Vialli. And he says, in my 2 years at Sampdoria, there were more fights and blows exchanged than in my 7 years at Liverpool. So he says of Vialli, a diplomat, intelligent, good thinker, good with people, and humble. And there you go. I just thought that was really good, Johnny, to get that first-hand insight. I mean, if you're the Sunday Times and you have Souness on your books and then you find out he played with Mancini and Vialli, I mean, it's quids in.
Yeah, I wondered, like, when the sports started to think, hey, this could work as a piece, because I just found a photo here, and a lot of this tournament has been kind of laced with nostalgia for me when you see Vialli and Mancini, and I have this kind of thing that I never want to see people looking older than the last time I saw them. And you see Mancini and Vialli getting that bit older, but it brings me back to the days of watching Italian football when we probably only had 2 channels, and it was the most amazing thing ever. And you see the Sampdoria jerseys on that page, and it kind of brings you all back. But whatever Souness learned from them in terms of, he speaks, the Italians back then did think more deeply about the game than we did, although we have since caught up. They saw it as a sign, something you studied. I learned so much when I was there, even from the young guys I played with, and tried to bring that back to Britain with me when I became a manager. Tried might be the operative word if you're a Liverpool fan.
Some of the hype is obviously just for an English audience. Like, throughout the Sunday Times, they've asked various quote-unquote celebrities like 3 questions. And so, for instance, on this page, it's just caught my eye. I mean, I think we could all live without knowing this. Watching brief, Rick Astley, pop star. Where are you watching the match this evening? At home in London. End of answer. I mean, you wouldn't say it's blowing your mind in terms of insight, but Rick Astley, everyone, is watching the match at home this evening in London. His favourite player is Harry Maguire, and he thinks it'll be England 2, Italy 1. So that's dotted around the Sunday Times with various people.
You do kind of wonder as well, like, and you read, you sent me on that article in The Guardian about the Danish fans who really felt intimidated at the game, the semi-final, and very lax security and all that. And funny what Vinny is saying there, that's exactly what my worked in England, and he worked when the IRA campaign was really kicking off, and it was very easy to be anti-Irish, and he said, I'd much prefer an English boss than an Irish boss when I was over there. He had great time for the English, but at the same time you wonder how much England winning this would be good for Boris Johnson and good for this sort of Brexit nonsense nationalism that has taken over the country, and part of me wants it to fail in that regard as well.
I know, I mean, Priti Patel just must have no shame. Like 3 weeks ago she was saying it was kind of not so bad to boo the players, and she got that, and now she's in her freshly opened England jersey and putting out tweets to beat the band.
James McDermott's piece is very good. He speaks about Southgate. Just a couple of lines, but he says Southgate is always polite in public but can be cutting in private. Unimpressed by the halftime team talk given by Sven-Göran Eriksson during a quarter-final defeat to Brazil at the 2002 World Cup. Southgate complained that England needed Winston Churchill but got Ian Duncan-Smith. And then he mentions the aforementioned Patel. After the victory over Germany, the Home Secretary tweeted, "What a performance, what a team, it's coming home," only for one person to quickly retort, "If football came home, you would try to deport it."
It is quite striking, Vincent, that this team have stood in flagrant and high-profile opposition to this Tory government on several issues, and shamelessly, Boris and friends have jumped on this bandwagon, and It's just like you just couldn't be a politician. The barefaced cheek of this is almost staggering.
Listen, we had the posturing of Boris Johnson meeting Marcus Rashford, for example, when Rashford was in the midst of that campaign to continue school meals during school holidays. And like the idea that a young footballer is doing the job of government and telling these people how to govern was astonishing and breathtaking. But these Tories, I sometimes look at Rees-Mogg, and I have that famous image of him reclining across the leather couch in the House of Commons, and it's all a pantomime to them, and they really don't give any sense of not just caring about people but understanding people. And you just can see it now. Johnson will be all over this like a rash tomorrow if they win. Priti Patel, what an obnoxious person. And I think the whole Brexit thing anyway, Joe, it has caught in microcosm that toxic superiority complex that these Tories have. And it's one of the reasons I think people are slightly terrified of England winning tonight, because all of these obnoxious gits, as I call them, will be coming out of the woodwork and taking ownership of something that has nothing to do with them. I think if you look at that England team, you've Rashford, you've Sterling, you've Jordan Henderson, all of these guys with a very clear social conscience. And I don't know, I'm sure it's probably Jordan Henderson has been part of the decision that if they win, a large portion of their prize money will go to the NHS. I mean, this is the modern thinking in that dressing room, and it's so divorced from Tory government.
No,
but the problem on that is, Vincent, Boris Johnson is absolutely obnoxious. Before the 2019 election, didn't he memorably basically hide in a fridge that he wouldn't have to answer a question from the government, and in that election they got 43.6% of the popular vote, the highest percentage for any party since 1979. So when you're backed by the people, despite clearly showing that you lie, you're deceitful, you don't care about people, yet you still get elected. What does that say? It basically says you can.
I tell you what, it tells you that the Labour opposition has been lamentable and continues to be lamentable.
What I dread if they win are the think pieces by Brexiteers saying Brexit has somehow allowed the national team to self-actualise. And that's good. That's coming. That's coming. We finally have the confidence to step forward.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you, Joe. Somebody is going to consider that a really intellectual take on this.
By the way, Eamon Sweeney, so the Sunday Independent main section, not the news section, but the main section has Shane Coleman arguing after 20 tournaments it's time to support England, whereas Eugene O'Brien is saying, no way, I'm not ready. Eamon Sweeney's definitely not ready. He couldn't be more of the opinion, how dare we even think about supporting England. So do you want them to win, Johnny, or no?
No.
Okay. Vincent, ultimately, will you know until you start watching it, or have you made up your mind?
No, I think I know. I think I know, Joe. And I think the moment the ball kicks off, I'm Forza Italia.
I suppose, briefly, the contradiction is, Joe, is that they've effectively 2 Irish lads in the team. Harry Kane even has Connemara links, but that actually makes it even harder. Like, every time, the Times, Paul Rowan has a good piece about Declan Rice and Grealish, and you can, as much as you can forgive Grealish, I mean, Declan Rice, seeing him blast out God Save the Queen, and I fully respect there are people on this island who have mutual and British-Irish nationality. I cannot watch Declan Rice blast out God Save the Queen and want England to win anything.
Yeah, it's difficult to play devil's advocate to that one, but yeah, okay, fair enough.
I'm sure you have something better than that.
I hear you on Rice. Look, he was young.
We were all young.
Well, that's true. Fellas, we're pretty much out of time. Is there any last piece you want to direct people towards or mention briefly?
I suppose there's the Liam Brady interview by Philip Quinn in the Mail, Joe. I would find this interesting because I'm old enough to remember Brady as an absolutely world-class player, one of the few we would have had, who obviously was magnificent for Arsenal in the old First Division and then went to Italy and played for Juventus and Sampdoria. I don't particularly like Brady as a pundit. He just strikes me as a lazy pundit. I don't hear much enlightenment coming from him. But this guy was a magnificent footballer, and it was such a thrill to have a player of his calibre wearing the green of Ireland. But I remember just a personal story. I remember Gabe Byrne on his morning programme before the squad was announced for the 1990 World Cup. And of course, there was huge excitement that we were going to Italy. And Gabe Byrne thought it was an outrage that Liam Brady, who was then 34, and playing with West Ham, but not playing particularly well with West Ham, but he was a national treasure, and Gay thought he should be in Jack Charlton's squad. And I got a phone call from Joe Duffy, who was then a researcher on the Gay Byrne programme, saying, would you come on and discuss this with Gay? Because I had written a column saying Jack was right, that a 34-year-old footballer who can't really hold his place in the West Ham team wouldn't have much to offer on the biggest stage in the world. But what he didn't tell me was he was going to put me on with Bruce Shields, the musician Bruce Shields, who absolutely eviscerated me for not having enough respect for one of our greatest ever players. And it was a very sobering interview, I have to say. But this is a great interview by Philip Quinn, where he talks about that era, and he talks about how he holds no grudges towards Jack, who obviously is deceased now. And it's an interesting piece because he also talks about his own mistakes as a rookie manager. And again, I remember interviewing Packy Bonner in Glasgow, and I think one of the things that Brady did when he was Celtic manager was he dropped Packy. So he's a sparky, edgy kind of personality to deal with, and I'm not sure he would ever have been really suited to management. But he found his place really eventually at Arsenal in charge of youth development.
Yeah, it's on page 74. It's an interesting read, and talks about his love of John Giles as well. I mean, really, I'm just going to spend the day trying to track down this Gay Byrne piece, frankly. Any contact I have at RTE will be emailed promptly. Go through the archives.
I know, like, the pandemic has gone on a long time and a lot of us have been locked up, but we've probably almost forgotten about that phase where the TV schedule was littered with vintage games to get us through it. And one night RTE put on 1974, an absolutely raucous Dalymount Park, Ireland versus USSR. And I'm not sure I'd really seen footage of it before. Giles was coming towards the end. I think it was Brady's debut.
It was
Don Givens got a hat-trick.
Yeah.
And I was watching this game and just wondering, and as you mentioned the late Jack Charlton, how have we got to a situation where Ireland are being labelled as a team that can play football? The pitch at Dalymount was absolutely awful. And we were passing the ball as if we were Brazil. And Brady looked like, I mean, anyone who was fortunate enough to be there, I think, will never forget the long hair of Liam Brady that day. He looked absolutely amazing.
18, I think. That was his debut, certainly. Yeah. Fellas, enjoyed the final this evening. Thank you so much for the chat. Great stuff. Vincent Hogan from the Irish Independent. Johnny Ward. Pleasure as always. Thanks, gents.
Who do you want to win, Joe?
Oh, I think on balance, Italy. I only realised I've been cheering England all the way through, and something in the semi-final clicked with me. The reality of what I was wishing into fruition.
To paraphrase Brian Clough, you had a chat with yourself and you agreed you were right.
Pretty much. I pulled back from the cliff edge just at the end. But you know what though? If England win, it won't be like, oh no, awful. I will find myself watching Southgate and the team walk around Wembley, and I won't be disgusted either, you know that way.
Declan Rice.
And Declan Rice. And Jack Grealish. All our guys. Fellas, thanks a million. Cheers.
Cheers, Joe.
Thanks, Joe.
We will go to Andy Moran at McHale Park. Where are we, Andy?
Joe, it's it could just continued in the way it was going. It's 5-9.